welcome back to the channel. You're riding with me in the Murci. One of the most popular questions that comes to me is, which is the favorite vehicle out of all my cars? Well, there's quite a few to choose from, but I'm going to tell you, at the end of the day, it always comes down to two. Either the Murci here or the SV. Now, both these cars are very special to me because they have very unique stories. The Murci I looked for over 3 years and was hoping to get it in California, but in the end, to get what I wanted, I actually had to go out of state, to Texas of all places. And this is the only car that I've actually purchased out of state, and I hope it is going to be my last. Now, if you move to the SV, that's where it was really unique because I had an allocation when they first came out. Then I gave it up in the hopes of getting a Ford GT, but I was unsuccessful in that department. But by the time Ford let me know, there were no allocations left for the SV. But just by chance, my friend Robert, who actually followed me during racing, was nice enough to help me. And at that point, when there were no allocations left, Lamborghini Beverly Hills contacted Italy and asked them if they could change one of their allocations over. And I was lucky enough at that time that they set it all up. I was actually very grateful. Even to this day, I'm very grateful of that situation because at the time when I wanted one, even used SVs were going for over $75,000 over MSRP. So they saved me a ton. But if you look at both cars, essentially, we have to look at it in my perspective. Now, is my perspective any good? Well, that's for you to decide. I have both of them, so maybe that makes me a good resource for information if you're thinking about going one way or the other. But ultimately, the decision is yours, right? Now, if we look at both vehicles, on the exterior, which is one of the most important things to me, the Murci just looks super sleek. And then on mine, I went to my good friend Alex, who owns SP Engineering, and changed over to the SV nose in pre-spray carbon fiber. Now, to me, that just kind of made it all look good. But as all of you know, it never ends. And then I wanted the carbon fiber rear engine hatch off of the SV, and I had to find it in pre-spray carbon fiber, which prompted me to make a call to my friend Neil. He was able to source me the unit which I wanted. He actually sourced the whole kit. Now, I haven't converted it over yet because I'm not 100% sure if that's the way I want to go. But I can say that I do love the Murci rear wing for the LP640 because it's active aero. I mean, it's very small, of course, it's subtle, but it just depends on kind of the look you like. Then on the Murci, of course, you know, with the active vents for the radiators, they call them the bat wings, that just makes this package complete to me. But again, it looks more sleek. So, you know, to me, as crazy as it sounds, maybe a bit more conservative. Then I look at the SV, and many people say it looks like a spaceship, which, I don't know, as time goes on, it doesn't look quite as extreme, but I must admit, when it comes down to it, if I have to make a choice in visual appearance, it's very, very difficult to beat the SV. And for me, that would be the choice. I mean, you know, it just looks unlike anything, especially around here, living in the middle of nowhere. I will say this, the rear to me, with all the gigantic diffusers, the fixed wing, even though I do prefer active aero, it just looks amazing. You put it all together, well, that's what you get. If you look at both cars and you talk about performance, it's not even a contest. I mean, not even driving them side by side on paper, it's just the SV, there's no question. I mean, just starting out, I think the LP640 makes like 632 horsepower. Modifications I've done, I've changed to the SV air filters, changed to the Lamborghini of Orange County exhaust, removed the secondary cats. I mean, it performs well. but you know, in every which way, the SV is just a numbers car. On the SV, for starters, I mean, it makes like 740 horsepower. So right there, pretty much, there's a huge advantage. Then you take the things it's done. You know, it was the record holder at the Nürburgring. It's just a phenomenal vehicle altogether. If you take a step back and you look at what I like to call the driving experience, some people call it the balance, it's a different story. And my opinion is skewed a bit because I've converted the LP640 to rear-wheel drive, which changed things drastically as far as that experience. But you know, you drive the SV and it's very, very mechanical. It's not as computerized as a lot of the newer cars, but it still has, you know, a lot of computers, a lot of driver's aids, there's no question. And I mean, even when you shut everything off, the car just handles like it's on rails. You know, all-wheel drive. It has, of course, still a single clutch transmission, which is my preference over the dual clutch, which helps it to kind of get that raw feel, but it's really just no match to the Murci. Now, as we spoke about, I'm not going to argue, performance-wise, SV's top tier, but you know, for actually having a good time and having fun, even when the Murci was all-wheel drive, that was really the way that I preferred. I mean, and then when I went to rear-wheel drive, it just changed the car completely. I mean, everything from top to bottom, the way it handles. And also, you know, the steering's much lighter, the car's lighter, it's faster, of course, no match to the SV, but it is a phenomenal car. So, you know, you break it all down and just having a good time and the feel of it, for me, it's going to be the Murci. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to hear a lot of comments. I love to hear those comments of how much all of you love the other vehicle or your vehicle more. That's great, but take it from me. I mean, I drive them both, and I put a lot of miles on both of them. It's pretty hard to beat this combination as far as having a good time and everything being together. Now, it is true, when we talk about driver's aids, as you saw right there, the tail end will come out on the Murci a lot easier than the SV. I'm not real critical on the interior, but I will say as we look at the Murci, the interior still looks really modern for the age of the vehicle, which I really like, and it's quite comfortable riding in this car. A couple things that I really like are that the seatbelts buckle in the opposite direction, and the contrast stitching is in the pattern that I like. Moving over to the SV, everything looks more contemporary because it's a newer car, and I really like everything about this interior as well. So for the most part, when you look at it, it would be a push again for me. However, there's one key factor that separates these cars apart, and this is what it is. It is the dash of the SV. This is my favorite dash, so that alone just cinches it for me. Now, this won't be a fair shake because it's about the exhaust, but it's such an important component to all of us. As I said, in the Murci I changed to the Lamborghini of Orange County exhaust, removed the secondary cats, and on the SV I went with the Lamborghini race exhaust with the tune because together you're supposed to get over 800 horsepower. Now, it's arguable. A lot of people say it actually makes it worse, but let's just stay with the sound and the assumption that even if both exhausts didn't make any difference on the power, the sound alone, well, the SV has an incredible cold start after you change the race exhaust because you have no valves. Whether or not the tune affects it, I don't know because I did them both at the same time. But the Murci is just different. The Murci has that high-pitched sound which is unique to all my cars. the cold start on the SV is the best of the best in my collection. But as far as driving, when it's at wide open throttle, for me the top choice is a Murci. And for that, the cold start of the SV just doesn't make it up. I mean, it's close, but the Murci has that F1 type sound, and that's kind of what I prefer. Now, in owning both of these vehicles, one important thing that I always look at is serviceability. That's why I'm a little bit concerned about the new NSX Type S being hybrid. I don't have any experience working on them, and it is my understanding that they are much more complicated. But both of these cars I've serviced. I've done extensive work on both. You've seen a lot of the videos. I can say this. They're fairly similar. Yes, the SV may have been a bit more difficult to do the service, but that is because I didn't have the workshop manual, which I'm still trying to get. So if any of you know where to get it, I'd appreciate it if you comment. So, you know, doing that work, I mean, if you take that out of the equation, it's very similar. So for me, I would probably call it a push. I mean, I know you don't like to see that, but that is the reality of the situation. And I mean, in the near future, I want to change the SV springs to the Novatec springs. That'll give me a much better feeling of what it's like to tear it apart, but at this current time, I don't know. Now, if you're going to take your car and bring it to the dealer, that is probably a different story. Because I will tell you from the small experience I have had of sending both these cars to the dealer, the SV costs a whole lot more to work on. I mean, it's probably all relative. The SV is a much more expensive car, therefore, you have much more bigger expenses when you take it in. And some of these expenses just seem quite excessive to me. But, as many will tell you, if you can afford the car, I'm sure you can afford the work. I know everyone's going to ask reliability, and I'm not 100% sure. I'll tell you why. The Murci here has like almost 10,000 miles on it. And I did have the e-gear potentiometer go out on me, which was extensive, but keep in mind, there were a lot of things that were changed because they were in there, such as the clutch, the throwout bearing, again, the like $4,000+ throwout bearing, for those of you that are keeping track. That was all done because it was in the shop. If you just go on the potentiometer, I believe it might have only been like a few thousand total, but obviously with the engine and trans out, they just decided to do everything, which I agree with. Now, if you look at the SV, the problem is that even though I've owned it since 2017, it only has like 1,700 miles on it. So yes, obviously nothing's gone wrong with it, but it hasn't really seen the type of usage that the Murci's seen. So for me to give you that advice would be incorrect. My take would be, I have no idea. I would really need to put more miles on the SV, which I hope to, but at the rate I'm going with the time I have, that could take a very long time. You can find a lot of stories of people that have had problems, but to me it almost seems like that's a minority, because people that are enjoying their cars and having no problems, typically they don't comment a lot in forums or anything you see. So, I mean, but you know what? If you guys have had your own experience, it'd be great that you comment, then others can learn, because if you have more miles on your SV, then you could probably chime in and shed some light on the situation. Now, ultimately, when I look at any of these cars, I always look at value. I mean, I hate to do it, but I always do. It's just like most of you that are driving these around. When you do drive them and you put more miles on it, you do realize that that probably is affecting the value if you sold it. Now, a lot of people like myself aren't going to sell them anyway, so I have no idea why we cause ourselves the internal turmoil, but it's just the way it is. I always look at value of everything. Here's where the problem is that I have with these two cars. Taking it from my experience only. Now, obviously, the original MSRP on the Murci is higher. But if you look at what's going on, the SV costs over twice as much than what I paid for the Murci. That's a tough pill to swallow for me, because as much as I love the SV, then it comes down to the fact, is it twice as much in everything? And for me, simply the answer is no. I mean, it's an amazing car, don't get me wrong. But when I look back at what I spent on both these cars, I mean, bang for the buck, this is the car. I mean, there's no question in my mind. Now, I'm sure that many people are going to argue that. That's great. I'm glad. Do it. Prove me wrong. But quite simply put, it's just too much to make up, too much ground to make up. Not to mention that the insurance premium, the registration, at least in California, is less on this car. You put all those together, you know, and some might say running costs, but the problem is that these things are all toys and they all cost to play with. That's the bottom line. So, simply put, for me, this is the best deal. And the problem with it is as you have all seen, it's very even between both cars, in my opinion. But when it comes down to that, that's the most important point when you're looking to purchase either of these. So for me, this comes out on top. And that's why I'm in it right now. Now, that was a blast. I enjoyed hanging with you guys and talking about these two cars. I could talk about these cars all day because I love them so much. But it's time for me to go out and have a good time, and for all of you to have a great weekend. I will see you next time. Take care.